Welcome to the Vintage House Show. Today we have WNUR royalty, the legends, the pioneers of the Street Beat Show, DJ Easy Lee, Lee Cross, and DJ Magic Mike, Mike Palos. Thank you all so much for coming to the show.
Hey, Lauren.
Hey, guys. So again, I am Lauren Lowry. I'm also a former WNUR Street Beat DJ. And, when I arrived at Northwestern, 1985 is when I arrived. I got my first show, probably 1986. All you heard was talk about Magic Mike and Easy Lee. And I'm thinking, who are these people? Where are they? What are they talking about? Right. So, but, you all's names continue to, it still does. I mean, again, when I started this project in 2014, people still said, if you want to understand where Street Beat came from, you need to talk to Easy Lee, and I was like, where is he? Who is this guy? So I'm so happy that people put us in touch years ago. The Dance Music Foundation is an organization dedicated really to the preservation and celebration of house music and dance music in its forms globally. But really, it's a collaborative effort to really recognize those entities and those people who assisted in making dance music a global force. And so our focus is a lot of house music, but, the Street Beat Show was hip hop and house, really dance music, street music. And, we definitely want to talk to the pioneers of the music form. So guys, again, thanks so much for obliging me. I'm sure you all are sick. This will be the last time I call y'all. I promise. This is it, because we got it on record now. People don't need to talk to me anymore. If they want to talk to you, they're going to talk to you themselves. How you all doing tonight?
Doing good. Thank you. Thank you for inviting us. Thank you.
No problem. Lee, how are you?
Yeah, I was going to say, Lauren, I really don't mind. I enjoyed, my time while I was there. And if I'm remembered, that's even better.
Well, you are remembered for sure. And luckily, there's some things in the archives that have your name on there. And so if people want to research, the thing is, the problem is there's only, so much, written information about the formation of these things and how you contributed to it. And that is a problem. You know what I mean? Because then people write you out of history if they don't know it. So we have to make sure that we are doing that. So we'll just jump right in. So Lee, the Street Beat Show became the Street Beat Show in 1983. And before I go backwards a little bit, talk to me about what you remember about, sort of arriving at Northwestern. 1980, what did you arrive at Northwestern?
1981, actually, the fall 1981.
Fall 1981. Mm-hmm. Were you at the station when they changed the name from the Soul Show to the Street Beat Show?
Yeah, actually, it's, I don't know if I would call it ironic, but it was coincidental. I don't know. Did you hear about Leroy Cooper recently? He was, well, let me tell the story then. So Leroy Cooper was a DJ on WNUR, and at that time it was the soul music format. And the reason why I mention it that way is he actually did just pass away this last year. Yeah, he was 2 years ahead of me. And you could kind of say he was like my mentor, so to speak, for coming down to the station, interviewing, and then actually getting the show. So, it's a lot of information here, but, at that time I was, doing the mixing thing, more on the hip hop side because I came from New York. I wasn't from the Chicago area. And he saw what I was doing and thought it was, good and unique. And he wanted me to do a show. But my problem was I'm a very introverted person. So it's like, oh, my God, I can't do a show. I have to speak on the air and all that kind of stuff. And I really hedged on it for a while. This was my sophomore year, by the way, because my freshman year, I did not bring my I guess I didn't really need my equipment to DJ on the radio. But I didn't have my equipment the first year because I was, concerned about doing well in school and the whole bit. So sophomore year, I brought it up and I was, doing some stuff in my room and he, found out about it. So I came down and watched the show with him. And actually, Tim was with me too, T. Chablis. We went down there together. And so, after it was over, he kept, in fact, he wanted both of us to get a show. And I thought about it. And then finally I said, well, what the heck, I'll try it. And so I got a show spring quarter of my sophomore year, which would have been in 1983. So at that time, it was still the soul music format. So I did do one show, before it went over to Street Beat. And I'm really going back. I believe it was Steve Cohn that was the producer at that time, or he was the following year. Mm-hmm. And the radio, they were looking at changing the name because they felt that soul music was not really as accurate, describing the music that we were playing. So they did like a contest. And it was, when I say it was a contest, it was like a phone in, what do you think should be the new name of the format? So based on that, that's how the name changed. And you were correct. That fall of 1983 is when it became Street Beat show. What was interesting was that, I was doing the mixing. And at that time, if you remember the history, the Hot Mix 5 had started. And again, this was coincidental. I came in the fall of 81, and that's when the Hot Mix 5 had started. So in the Chicago area, hot mixing was, huge. So they, I forget whether it was Steve or, the radio station had asked me if I wanted my own mixing show. And I said, yeah, I'll take that. That's, I'll have to think twice about that. And it was 5 hours. So yeah, wow, it was interesting because at that time you had the fight, for the black music formats, you had to fight just to get the 3 hours, for the soul music format. So anyway, that fall is when I started the hot mixing show. That first year I had 5 hours and then it, kind of went from there.
So thank you so much. I always like to start a little bit with what we're talking about, which is WNUR, but we're going to go back a little bit. And Mike, we will definitely get to you. Easily tell me where you were born, where you grew up, and what high school you went to, and your first introduction to music. So, so what you were listening to in your community and your high school. Sure.
Yeah. So as I mentioned a little earlier, I'm from New York. I was born in Staten Island, but I was raised in Queens. Specifically, the area is South Jamaica, St. Albans area. I went to a high school called Q Forest School. It was a private school. A lot of the students from Northwestern came from private schools, Catholic schools, that sort of thing.
Interesting.
And so I went to private schools my entire time going to school, but the high school I was there from 8th grade to 12th. It was actually a very good school, by the way. So when I graduated in the summer of 81, I wound up coming over to Northwestern that fall. The school was recommended to me by the principal, at my school, because I had never heard of Northwestern before. Being from the Northeast, it's not, school most people would know about it unless you, came from a family or background that had parents, I guess, that, were, educated or, from college or whatever. So with regards to the music that I listened to when I was growing up, my parents were very religious, and I was raised Baptist. And the music that they listened to was a lot of the, like Mahalia Jackson, the Swan Silvertones, Mighty Clouds of Joy, you name it, Five Blind Boys, Alabama, Five Blind Boys, Mississippi. Right. That's what they like to listen to. But, when I was growing up, thank God there was a radio. So I did like that music, but I did also listen to, your R&B, soul formats, as well as pop. And then the 70s was unique because you had disco, which I still was kind of young to try to get into the clubs. But by the mid 70s, I was old enough to, get into that. And that's where I really got my love of music, from there.
Got it. Mike Palos, DJ Magic Mike, what's up?
Hey.
Give me a little bit of your origin story. Are you from Chicago?
I'm born and raised West Side Chicago, Humboldt Park.
West Side, love, nice.
And we moved a little bit more north into Albany Park, closer to Evanston.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I went to Roosevelt High School.
Okay. Where is Roosevelt High School?
Yeah, Roosevelt High School. It's on Kimball and Lawrence area.
Interesting.
Yeah. And we just barely caught 89.3 FM over there.
Got it. And so your early musical memories, talk to me a little bit about what you remember about your introduction to music and what you were interested in, sort of in your high school years or even before that.
Well, raised with single mom and 4 kids, mom loved disco.
Nice.
And never shut the radio off, just disco, 80s funk. And I mean, that was mom, Mexican mom, but she was raised all American herself. So, and just like I mentioned, like all the regular kids growing up in that era, listening to the Hot Mix 5 and mixing the radio and recording with your TDK, Tone Master cassettes, just record it and play it back all week, That's all we did.
Got it. And so how did you become sort of more interested in music? Because at some point, I know you listened to the radio and then I know a little bit about your story, but what makes you think, you listen to the radio and then you actually want to be involved in the music form?
Yeah. I had a little birthday party. I was 11, 1981. And some friends said, can we come over and DJ? So he had these 2 turntables, this golden mixing box. And I was hooked. I spent the whole night just staring at them. I needle on the record and spinning the headphone thing. I was hooked. And then I just listened nonstop to the Hot Mix 5 and Street Beat Show, and just calling in, talking to Lee and Tim, and wow, somebody answered the phone, and they invited me. Lee invited me down, and I just never left their shadows.
Yeah, Mike was definitely a stalker. Sorry to barge in his time there, but
no. This is a conversation, so I definitely want you all. That's why I have the both of you here, and not many more, so we can all sort of have these memories, and you all can contradict each other or correct each other, because sometimes these memories fade. You don't know what really happened. So that's really cool, though. I think one of the cool things about Northwestern folk, to me, as I see it, as I continue to talk to different DJs, is that Northwestern was very open to letting the community in. You know what I mean? It's like, we were like, you like the music? You want to come and hang? Come on down and hang, and in the real world, it was probably a liability to have, all these random people like in the studio. I mean, I used to have, the whole South Side was in the studio with me. It was terrible. If people didn't come in behind me, it'd be like, yo, come on down. We're about to kick it for another 3 hours. I mean, they were doing all kinds of things in that spot. I mean, it's just crazy. But so that's really cool. So Lee, I'm coming back to you with now you have a show. You and T-Shot Blee are doing different things. And I'm sorry to hear about Leroy Cooper. I think I did interview him some time ago, very long ago. And I'm sorry to hear that. I did not know he passed. Did you tell? No, I don't know. But what was the environment at the station there? Who else was doing the Soul Street Beat show? I recognize when I look at the documents, and of course, I'm big on artifacts. So that's what we do is collect memorabilia. When I saw this the first time, I'm like thinking to myself, like the Soul Show is being renamed Street Beat, and someone named Steve Kahn is the head of the Soul Show. And then someone named Catherine Kerr is now the sole producer. And I'm thinking to myself, these people cannot be of African descent. I just can't see it. So Cone and Kerr, I just don't see it. So I'm like, how are, but of course, then you start to realize Europeans always love, sort of Black music and, so music birthed, sort of with African roots. How was that? Did that strike you as funny too? Or it was just like the name of the game being at Northwestern?
Yeah, well, if you take a step back, it's true. I forgot what the percentage of African Americans were at Northwestern when I was there, but it seemed to be significant enough because there were a lot of Black people on the campus, but I don't remember whether the percentage was, 10% or 5%, or I'm sure it wasn't, more than 10. But the thing you have to remember about WNUR is that it was a school, and if it was your major, then wherever you can get the experience, you're going to try to apply for that, position. So I wasn't in the school. I just happened to be someone that liked DJing and was, that was my hobby. I was pretty good at it. So I got a show. And then also you have to think about the fact that, not everyone that gets a show may want to work in, quote unquote, the management, position. I know when I first started there, I was only on air for about 2.5 years. It seems like it was a long time, but I joined in the spring quarter of my sophomore year. And I kind of wish I had joined earlier than that, but it is what it is. And I was, on the air for 2.5 years. And the last year that I was on on the air, I became a producer. So I was in that, management role. And I did notice that. And so when I had the position, I made sure that I visited, or at least spread the word out, because I was plugged in, to the Black community. And I remember a couple of times I went to different, like if there was a talk or something, not necessarily a regular class, but an event, where there was mostly Black people at, I would tag on to that and let them know, come on down, interview. We're positioned, on the format, because we definitely need to have representation there. So, that's actually a nice a call out on your part to notice that, because that was something I did notice myself, when I was part of the format. It wasn't that we didn't have any, African-American DJs, because like I mentioned, Leroy Cooper was a DJ, before me, and there were several others. It's just that, I wanted to just spread the word and make sure, especially once I had gotten the format. It wasn't like every slot had to, go to a Black person, but like you said, it's just Black music. So I definitely wanted, Black people on campus to be aware, of it. And
what was your major?
I majored in engineering.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was I. I was also an engineer, and loved the music. And I was like, I need a show. I need to get in there. But it was definitely not what I meant was,
right,
meant to go to Northwestern for. Talk to me about how you became interested in so you come to Northwestern and you meet, Tim, et cetera. But how do you decide, how are you DJing? And were you DJing sort of other parties outside of WNUR? Were you doing some school parties, frat parties, other things like that? And then how do you learn? It's like, I like this music. How do you like the music and then say, I'm a DJ? That's weird.
Yeah, one of the things I neglected to mention, because Mike did a good job of mentioning how he got involved in DJing. I was a sophomore in high school when I had my, oh wow moment. And it was, New York again, it's a home of hip hop, right? So I wasn't, around at the earliest parts of it back in the early 70s, because a lot of that happened up in the Bronx. But by the later 70s, DJing was all over the city, with regards to block parties and that sort of thing. And I remember going to a street party that summer. It was, I want to say it was at the end of my sophomore year in high school. And they were playing Good Times. I'll never forget it. They had this set up, outside. And it wasn't nothing extravagant, just a folding table with a couple of, turntables. But they had these speakers with the bass, man. I just loved it. Mm-hmm. And they had Good Times going. And it was like, oh, my God, this is just, I got to do this. And then there were a couple other guys that I was friends with, that, I hung out with, and they were interested too. It's just how I kind of got into it. By my junior year, I was fortunate enough where, I was the only child. And not fortunate I was the only child, but by being the only child and my parents got divorced when I was 12, but my dad was definitely in my life. But, it was sort of like a single parent, thing. My mom said she went ahead and bought me my first set. It wasn't real expensive, but I had a couple of, belt-driven turntables, belt-drive turntables, a small mixer, and some small speakers, and I set it up in the basement, and that's how I started, playing. I actually, I hate this, I don't know if it sounds a little ego driven, but I did teach myself the mix for the most part. I would listen to tapes that I would get from other DJs that were around and try to reverse engineer it, And I had seen, people mix. I mean, it's not like I did it all, but I had to kind of learn it on my own because I didn't really have a group that I was hanging out with. And so I practiced a lot. One thing I was good at was practicing. And so by the time I got to Northwestern, though, all I could really do was scratch and backspin. I didn't know how to fade. I didn't know how to blend mix at that point. And that's what I learned later. But that's what we were doing in New York. All we did was just, play those beats, the percussion, throw in the break, backspin, play it for 2 or 3 minutes, then throw in another, break and keep going from there. So when I got to Chicago in 1981, one of the things I kind of had going for me is because there weren't a lot of New Yorkers in Chicago at the time, my scratching was kind of ahead of the time at that point. Of course, later on, it kind of fell behind, but because, when others started, doing it, and I kind of got away from it, my skill kind of went away. But for about 2 or 3 years, it was what I was kind of known for. And I had to learn how to blend mix later. Because this is really going to make you laugh. And I don't know if, any of you remember, maybe Mike does, but on the belt-driven turntables, at least on the cheaper models, your pitch was just a knob that you would turn. It wasn't, like your 1200s where you had that sliding bar. It was a little knob, not knob, a little wheel, spin wheel. I didn't even know what that was.
What?
When I first started DJing, I was like, what is this pitch for, Because I never blend mix, was always throwing the record in on the beats. So, and after I got to Northwestern, and a nice story there is, and this is, I don't know if it's Providence, but what's weird is that when I went to orientation, who did I wind up sitting next to? I mean, out of the whole, auditorium, it's like 100 people in there. Tim,
Wow.
and we had no idea that we each liked music and DJing it. We just, talked to each other, struck up a friendship, and found out later, and he actually had his equipment the first year we were there. But from what I recall, he only had one turntable, a nice speaker, and a mixer, but he didn't have 2 turntables. So that was kind of funny. But, you did what you had to do back then.
Right. That's interesting. That is a good story. Thank you so much for going back and remembering that. Now, that's always interesting. I think I think maybe you don't think this, but you say, this guy's this great DJ and he's doing like, where did he start? At what point do you have because, again, not everyone says, I love this music and I want a turntable and a mixer. You know what I mean? It's like, I love this music and I just want to dance. You know what I mean? Or people,
exactly.
That kind of thing. So it's always interesting to see sort of how you come about. So what is that? 1982, you have a show.
1983.
So 1983, you have a show, and this young 11-year-old is calling the station. He's blowing up the station. Why are you blowing up the station, Mike?
I don't know. I was always pretty much advanced. I was 11 going on 21, like many DJs, you're nerds and you want to figure out how things work and master it and focused on it. And I was hooked.
Got it. So you're calling the station. And so what are you saying? Like when you're calling the station, what are you saying to them? Like, I want to come down and just, hey, I like the music. Who is that? How do you start?
I never expected to get invited. I just called in, hey, can you play this song and that song and how you guys doing? And just small talk.
Got it. And so how is it that you end up at the station? Help me out.
Okay. So one of the co-DJs of the night was DJ Vinny Divine.
Vinny Divine, yes.
So he was on the show with Lee, and I think I made a mixtape cassette or something, and I just did my little microphone intro. You're in the mix with DJ Magic Mike. Check it out because it's fresh, wild, and nasty. So Vinny, he sampled that, we had back then. You had these 8-track cards for the playing commercials and promo. He sampled that.
Nice.
So it got popular. So I got popular, and I got invited down to the show, and I was like, Mom, I gotta go. She says, okay, be careful, So she knew I was.
Yeah, I remember when he came down for the first time, because I want to say it was his brother-in-law. I know his sister was there, and one of his friends, and I forgot the family name, but you know who I'm talking about. Your mother's friend's daughters, or daughter. And I'll never forget, because it was a small car, and it seemed like when he arrived, I saw all these people get out, and then all of a sudden Mike got out last. I was like, how did they fit in the car? But yeah, they brought him up. Yeah, they brought him up. And I think that after, I don't remember when I met his mother, or maybe I talked to her on the phone or something, but I think that she just, thought that I was trustworthy. And I have to say, Mike was, a good guy. Not that I, would expect anything, bad from, anyone, but you don't know who's you're meeting, and that sort of thing. Right. And he was definitely clean cut, very polite, and was willing to, learn a lot. And everyone that was in our little group, he, like you mentioned, Vinny and Tim, and at that time, I don't believe MD had come up, had started school yet. This was before he started. So everyone liked Mike.
Yeah.
Mike
Mike was young. I mean, we were young, but Mike was at least 4 or 5 years younger than us. So,
That's
it was
what's
like,
amazing. Number one, my parents would never have taken me up to Northwestern and be like, yeah, you're going to do a radio show with some red people. But what's cool is the story is, again, you had the whole family come up there with you. So that is very interesting. Yeah. That's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. How'd you get them all to agree to do that, Mike? I mean, because seriously, how does an 11, 12-year-old get their parents to be like, yeah, I just called these people on the air and then they're going to let me come up? Like, how does that happen? How did you do that?
Well, the backstory on that was my current brother-in-law which was my sister's boyfriend. And he had a huge family, and my family was 4. And we always lived together as neighbors. So my mom and their single mom would always hang out. So we did everything together. And our brother-in-law, who was a little older, hey, can you give me a ride up to, Evanston? And sure. And can we all go? Okay.
And what time of night was that? I mean, is this during the day or is this at night?
This was
definitely at night. I do remember it was at night. Yeah. I don't remember how late it was, but.
Yeah, the show was from 10 to 2.
Right.
Yeah, and I was there.
I mean, someone's got school. My imagination is like, there's got to be some school going in there. Boy, they loved you, Mike.
I got a little older, like 13. I would take 2 buses and 2 trains, change it to Howard, and then walk to the campus and be on time with my bag of mixtapes for the show. And then I remember a few times where everyone was late. I'm always early. And then the jazz show was ending, and she's like, well, you ready to take over? I'm like, well, I didn't want to open my mouth and say I wasn't a regular radio jock, but sure. I sat in that chair like I was grown. And push the button, talk on the mic, Street Beat Show, and just play my 30-minute mixtape till it popped, and hopefully somebody came in and relieved.
Nice. Yeah, that happened a lot. If you were a little bit late, it was always great to have an intern or the apprentice there because they could at least do something. I'd be like, look, it's not going to be dead air. That's for sure. So that's really interesting. All right, so Lee, 1983, you got your show. Tim Harris is T. Chablis, and he's, sort of doing some interesting things. What was happening at WNUR? So how were you all becoming, known, popular? How did you see the music forum going? Clearly, the Daily Northwestern did an article about you. How are you feeling about sort of being in this somewhat of a spotlight?
Well, of course you get a big head, right? And, like I had mentioned earlier, I'm an introverted guy. So I don't know so much I was trying to, get really popular, but, it's nice to have, people say nice things about you. What I liked about the station, though, was the meeting people part because, of course, Mike is somebody I've stayed in touch with since that time. And there's actually a couple of other, people that I have too that I've met, through the radio station. And you have people call in and that's how you meet and it's the love of the music and we're all young at the time. So you're very impressionable. It's not that old. I mean, you graduate college at the age of 22 on average, 21, 22.
Right, yeah.
So, everything is just a lot of fun, especially if you have a passion for it. And the thing that was nice about Tim, because I really, looked at him as like my turntable brother, so to speak, because we were same age and, the whole bit. He started about a year after I did because about the time when I started, this is a story I usually like to tell, and he had pledged, for fraternity around that time. That's why he didn't start when I did, because I had mentioned earlier, we had both gone down and met with Leroy together. And so after he got offline and, he was, Sigma, I kept on him, telling him, you got to get a show because, I know that you like doing this too. And I was kind of surprised he was even more shy than I was about going on the air and because of the speaking part. And I said, it's not that bad. Come on down. And I had him come down to my show and see what it was all about. And so he finally agreed. And then I don't remember what he got his own show first or we did one together. I think we did one together first. So it made the transition, even easier for him. And then after we did a show together, then he got his own show. And it, went off from there. We both kind of had our own different path, right? Because he was truly the house guy. Grew up in Chicago and the whole bit. And I played a lot of hip hop in the beginning, and then I kind of went over into like the hot mix stuff. So we weren't really, we were competitive, but we weren't truly head to head, right? Because we each had our own different styles. I did a lot of scratching, and then he was really good with the blending. So he was the one that kind of, he showed me how to blend. I showed him how to scratch. So we were able to help each other out there. And that was really, again, we had the street beat format. And I guess I'm neglecting to say that a lot of the other shows were very similar to the soul format previously because they were the 3-hour shows during the week. Mm-hmm. I believe it was 12 a.m. to 3 in the morning or 11 to 2 or something like that. But it was really your off hours. Mm-hmm. And because we were doing the mixing, stuff, we were, kind of treated special, I guess, where we got better hours because usually it would be like from 8 to 12 or 7 to 12. Sometimes it would be in the afternoon on a Saturday, 12 to 3. So, so that was the thing going on there.
I got so much background noise on my end.
Okay.
So you all, so essentially, again, you're starting to mix. People are starting to understand and know sort of, who you are, what you're doing. How was the campus? Was the campus sort of involved in sort of what you were doing? Were they, how were the kids? They knew who you were because you were a DJ. How was that? How'd that work out for you in terms of sort of people knowing who you were because you were a DJ?
Well, I don't think it's pervasive to the point where I was walking down the campus and people were jumping all over me. But there definitely, and the thing I neglected to also mention is that, and this is where I was kind of overextending myself, I was doing parties. Again, they were, strictly the Black, fraternities and sororities. And even that, it was interesting because it took a minute for me to even get a chance to do that because it was, typical story where in the beginning, and I want to say it was the it was either spring quarter of my sophomore year or the fall quarter of my junior year is when I started trying to get a gig. And everybody was like, no, we don't know you. We're not interested. Every fraternity, right? And so it just so happened that, and if Terry Brown listens to this, giving a big shout out to her. But Terry and I were in MEOP together, which was a program. I don't know if it's still around now, but back then it was a program that was offered to blacks and Hispanics, basically minorities, and I guess Asian also. Prior to your start of your engineering, year, your fall quarter of your freshman year, and Terry and I were in that together. And the only reason why I kind of mention that is that later on, Terry went on, she pledged Delta. And when she got out, it just so happened around that time I was looking to try to get my first party. And so I asked her, I said, well, if you guys ever need somebody, please let me know, because I'm trying to get, my break or whatever. And at that time she said, well, we don't, we have our own DJs, so we don't have a need. But it just so happened that, I don't know if it was a month later or 2 months, it was very soon after I had spoken to her that there was one weekend where they needed a DJ because their DJ had dropped out the last minute. And what was also kind of weird was that it's unusual that the same fraternity and sorority would have two parties that same weekend, because normally maybe the Alphas would have something on a Friday night and the AKs would have something on a Saturday, but the Deltas actually had a party on Friday night and Saturday night. Oh, wow. So now I'm doing two parties as an unknown. I'm either going to do well or just really, bomb out. So I remember my very first party was not even in, because at that time we were doing parties in Foster Walker Basement. There were, if it was a bigger party, it was in the Norris, ballroom. Mm-hmm. This one I remember was in one of the lounges of one of the dorms. Because I remember it was, like when you're walking through the front door, and it was actually a nice lounge, but it was kind of, to have a party in there was kind of difficult because it wasn't really like you had a dance floor, so to speak. But anyway, that's where I did my first party, and it went over very well. It was one of those things where, because nobody knew me, didn't know anything about what I was doing, and then when they found out and knew I was a student there, it made it even more impactful. And you know how it goes. I mean, you have the Black community, whether you want to call it the underground or whatever, but word spread. And then after that party, that Saturday night, I did the second one. I forgot where that one was. It may have been in Foster Walker Basement, but that one went well as well. And then, I started doing that. But it was a lot, because I was on the radio, and then I had to prepare tapes for that, mixes. And then, later on, I became the producer of the format. So I was on the board, and it was just a lot, going on. But it was a lot of fun, too. I mean, when you're that young, I guess you do stuff like that. You're staying up. Yeah, exactly. Right. Staying up 20 out of 24 hours and enjoying yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly how Magic Mike at 13 is at the station, so doing things. So how long were you at the station, Mike? I mean, you started at 11, 1980, 102? What year was that? You came 2 or 3? What year did you come up to the station first?
I believe I was in 8th grade, so whatever that was. Is that 12 or 13?
What year was that, Lee, that you let him in?
It had to be, I want to say no earlier than 84. In 85, I was graduating that summer. So it was probably around 84.
Mike, what do you remember about the station? What do you remember about coming in that day and sort of, clearly you kicked it around there for some time. Give me your sort of WNUR story, start and stop.
Yeah, just going there. I don't remember the name of the building. Was it Annie Mae Swift, was it?
Yeah, it was
Annie Mae
Swift.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. Come in those big heavy doors, go downstairs, the basement and hallways and first studio. And I remember it's records everywhere. and wooden shelves, and everything's tight. No, I don't know how you did it lately, but there was no room for 3 or 4 people there, and
That's
2
true.
tables. Yeah, so it was just all about playing the high energy imports, Italo dance, is what I remember. And then once in a while, Leah played that Roxanne, and the Treacherous Three, and some of that hip hop. But and we were just dance music and just playing mixes, and I was like a hermit at home. Just that was my high, just to stay in that room, 2 turntables, a mixer, and create a record. Just a year later, I think I was a professional by then. I mean, you're talking hundreds of thousands of hours on turntables, front, back, side, round and round. It was just nonstop. It was. I remember the show was. I was committed. I was there. I would hang out. Would even play my mixtapes. Just hang out and just I love it. That was my passion to be there.
So did you get to know some of the other DJs? Who else do you remember was at the station besides Easy Lee and Tim?
Yeah, I remember there was Lee and Vinny Divine, and of course T. Chablis, and then there was Rock and Rob Olson.
Of course.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He was kind of odd. I guess I was kind of odd, but we were all DJs and the passion for music. And Sweet MD, Meredith Johnson came in later on. And we had Larry. Yeah, Larry come in. And who else was there?
Who else do you remember, Lee? Is there anybody else you remember? Is there a Carmen Hudson? Did you know Carmen?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Carmen, when because I had mentioned I was producer my last year there, I had actually asked Carmen, to be producer, when I left, which I believe she did, which I believe she was the producer after, I left in 85 and I believe she took over in 86. So yeah, I knew Carmen, and, it's, as the years go on, I will admit, I don't remember everyone that was on the format and the staff. In fact, I have come across some paperwork over the last year because it's a more personal thing, but about a year and a half ago, my mother passed away. And I decided to move back, to New York, and because I've been living away for many years, and so I decided to take over her residence. And so I've been going through everything, and I'm just amazed at all of the stuff that I had, in the house and saved that I had forgotten about. So I have, I forget what you call those, but when you were doing shows back then, you would write down every song that your
playlist,
that you did, the playlist. That's it. So I have the spiral, books of the playlist. I have paperwork. Yeah, I have paperwork from when I was a producer on who had what show. And so, Rob Olson was definitely, in fact, I remember Rob to be a very passionate, and he was a great guy, actually. I remember he would, if I was ever, because as a producer, now you're responsible for staffing. And if somebody calls in the last minute and they can't do a show, you may have to do it if you can't find somebody, Mm-hmm. So I remember Rob was like my go-to guy because he would do all the shows if he could, and I appreciate that about him. He didn't have to, of course, but I mean, I always had him as a go-to person. Another guy that, again, unfortunately he passed away also, but Andrew Yao was from Evanston, and I know his dad was, I don't know whether he was a chair of one of the engineering departments he was definitely a professor there, but he had a very lofty position there. And Andrew, but everybody used to call him Andy. He started my senior year. And the joke that, T and I always had was when I first met him, he was one of those guys that just really had a nice, he was a very, you know, the way he came across was very easygoing, great guy. He was a great talker, you know. So I didn't even really know this guy this well. He comes up to me, he says, hey, I want to do a party, right? But I don't have any equipment. Would you mind me borrowing your equipment? And I'm like, I just met this guy, and it's like, but he was so, well, first of all, he said, look, my dad is, you know, X, Y, because I think his dad was like over one of the engineering departments, like, you know, whether it was chemical or whatever. So he said that I live in Evanston. My dad is professor here. You could trust me, blah, blah. So I did actually loan it to him, and you know, nothing went wrong in a whole bit. But T will always remind me about that, about him, you know. And we actually stayed in touch, you know, over the years. We fell out of touch for a while. And then I spoke to him. It was about a year before he passed away, unfortunately, due to a car accident.
Wow.
But again, you know, just like with Mike, you know, just people you meet through the music, because he had a love for music. And he actually, after he graduated, he stayed with it, you know, for about, you know, 5-10 years doing parties, you know, outside of, well, he graduated already, but he stayed with it. He did parties. He was doing like it was a hobby for him, but it was like a part-time, you know, hobby. So he did a lot of weddings and stuff like that. And so, but yeah, I just was mentioning him because he was another one that was on the format, you know, at that time. I know Carmen had a show. I remember there was a lady named Lady CTA was her moniker. She had a show.
Someone told me about her.
Yeah.
Do you remember her name?
I have to check again, because when I was looking through my old files, all I saw was Lady CTA.
Oh God, I gotta find her. Got to find Lady CTA. Have to write that down immediately.
Mm-hmm.
I think I talked to Ira and Meredith, and they were saying, I was also trying to get a sense of who the lineups were, and they said Lady CTA. Her name was. I was like, oh Lord, I'll never figure it out.
Yeah. Then there was another guy, John Juan. He was a guy that I, you know, had met and, you know, got a slot. So I'd have to go back and look through the files again. But
John Juan, W-A-N or what?
John Juan. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. John Juan was not a student. He was actually somebody. He was from Evanston, and how I met him is he called into the radio station and he wanted his mixes played. And so I said, fine, you know, just, and so because he lived in Evanston, he stopped by the station. I met him, and we actually became friends. I've since fell out of touch with him, but, you know, again, this is now 30 years removed, right? So for the first 10 years after I graduated, or 15 years, we had stayed in touch, but then, you know, we kind of fell out. And then Mike, you remember Renee
Yes.
Hernandez. Now I fell out of touch with him, and he was down there all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was down there all the time.
Good,
Renee Hernandez. Yeah. But he was from Chicago too, so he was not a Northwestern University student. He was someone that listened to the show, you know, that was from the Chicago area. But, you know, once he came down and met us, he was down there all the time because he loved the music. He was a great guy.
I love the community DJs, because right now I'm a community DJ, you know, at the station. And I just really am so happy that they embrace, you know, sort of bringing in everyone from the community to contribute to the music form or do whatever. So Renee Fernandez or Hernandez?
Oh, Hernandez, Hernandez. Yeah.
So that is really cool. So Mike, again, so how long did you stay at the station? When did you stop coming to the station? What year would you say that was?
I think when Lee graduated and left, I kept hanging out with Sweet MD.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's at least till about 86, 87. Yeah, I would give him my mixtapes and hang out, and he'd always be late because he'd come from the South Side. So they gave me the opportunity to get my mixtape on first.
There you
And
go.
we had this old transistor thing we had to take readings. You guys remember that?
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Supposed to do it every half hour. 5 hours go by and I wouldn't do anything.
I still
But,
don't. They still want you to do
survived,
that. I'm
yeah.
like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. So yeah, it was definitely, and then after a while, I remember the station got an upgrade. So we went from the knobs to sliding a board there, up to date and buttons and I think you guys are all computerized now.
Well, I was there in '86 or whatever. It was definitely not the knobs. It was definitely the
Yeah.
sliding tracks.
Yeah.
And it's definitely very different today. And I invite you anytime you come to Evanston post-COVID, as long as I have access to the station, you are all invited to come and kick it with us at any time.
Yeah, I think you've asked me once or twice.
And did you come? No.
No. I'm coming. I promise.
Please, I can't even get in there now. I'm sure they won't let just the students can go in now.
Okay.
So at some point, maybe we'll get back in. How did you see the station change in that time from 1982 or 3 to the time to 86? How did the music form change? How was the popularity of the music change? How did that happen?
It was the biggest thing on planet Earth. At least we thought it was, with house music. Every DJ wanted to get a drum machine and three syllables, Jack Your Body, House Nation, whatever it was. And then we had a Jesse Saunders interview. Mark Imperial was good friends with Vinny Divine and his brother Joe Long, and just DJs and producers at one after another. The power plant was huge. The warehouse was huge. Sawyer's Disco. It was a lot of just deep house. I believe it was Resurrecting Disco, Lolita Holloway, and Deputy of Love. They were definitely resurrecting the deep house and the underground disco tracks, and then a lot of sampling of that. So it was a collage. It was a lot of house music and a lot of Chicago homemade drum machine music. Farley, Jack Master Funk, and all those eras it was huge. It was huge.
Yes, definitely the music form was becoming a staple in Chicago, sort of house music anyway. Hip hop was a global, even early on, it was national, and then all over the place, the culture of hip hop was big. House music was big. It was, again, huge in Europe. Again, definitely UK, definitely Germany. They were just loving the music, and they were getting the music from people like Rob Olson, because he was compiling the music and taking it over there. So he had a long career in radio after that. But of course, the lawyers and all these other people were taking music. The record producers and promoters were taking the music, not paying the artists and things, like Chicago artists and things like that. But, T. Chablis is considered one of Chicago's 100 pioneering house music DJs. And so from what, when they have events, they always mention T. Chablis. No one ever gets to talk to T. Chablis. And of course, he's almost disappeared from memory. But sometimes when they do things, they always add him in as someone who was influential about that. Did you see the music form going in that direction, Lee?
You talking about like towards house music?
Towards house music. Did you see it becoming sort of a genre that would, have roots today, or hip hop, or did you see it something like, did you know right away this is going to be big, or you're just like, yeah, this is good, and then I'm out?
Well, hip hop, I'm just trying to put myself in that time. At that time, I really never thought that hip hop was going to die, because I could just see it kind of, growing. I was so close to it that, it was just a matter of, eventually it would kind of go through one level to the next level to the next level, that sort of thing. House, I wasn't as close to when I was in Chicago because, at that time, I don't know what it was, but I just never really, because T definitely had that side. He had his own people, so to speak, that he was hanging out with. I had my own network or whatever. It wasn't that we didn't like each other, but it's just, we had our own different, networks. And then T and I would come together, whenever, because we were always, friends in that respect. But what was interesting is that when I went back to New York, because again, I graduated in 85, right? When I went back to New York, I had experienced what was going on in the Chicago area for 4 years. And that was mostly, Hot Mix 5, that sort of mixing. I did have a chance to go to, and I don't remember the club now, but it was the one that Frankie Knuckles was spinning at before I left.
Paradise Garage?
That was in New York, but maybe it was the Power Plant or one of those.
Oh, you were in Chicago? Yeah, the Power Plant.
In Chicago,
he created the Power Plant. Yeah, the warehouse.
Okay, so that's where I went though. I went there once, so I was aware of that. But when I went back to New York, they had their own house, thing going. In fact, when I kind of circled back around later, many years later, I didn't realize that a lot of it really came from New York because Frankie Knuckles came from New York.
He did.
He was, a very good friend of, the name slips me now, but you probably know the names. I can't think of the name now, but he was the legend, that came from New York or was in New York. Nicky
Ciani? Nicky Ciani?
No, it was actually, there you go, Larry Levan. I couldn't think of his name. But Larry, from what I understand, he was friends, with Frankie Knuckles. And they were, Larry was huge in New York, of course, and Frankie came over to Chicago, and he was the guy in Chicago. But when I came back, house was big, and you had only way I kind of differentiate New York house from Chicago house is your record companies that were releasing your records, basically. So if it was on a New York label, that's New York house. The Chicago label is Chicago house.
Right.
A lot of nice tracks, coming from Chicago. And then New York had a lot more, I don't know if I would say it's more sophisticated, but they would have the vocals, on the tracks, and they were producing those songs. And so I started really trying to emulate the DJs that were on the radio at that time in New York. I don't know if you guys would be familiar with those names, but people like Timmy Regisford, Merlin Bob, these are all sort of disciples of Larry Levan anyway. Mm-hmm. Larry Levan was in the disco. He wasn't doing the DJing on the radio, but he was, releasing the records where he would do the production or whatever. Tony Humphries, another big name. One of the things that they were doing that I really, really loved was, which was a little different than Chicago, because Chicago, with the hot mixing, you do those 16 bars, bam, the next, song is in there. These guys would take a record and they would blend a song like for 4 or 5 minutes. And it would be like one of those, they try to do it, kind of seamless. So that by the time the record that they blended into comes out, you don't really notice it. And I love that style. So when I got back to New York, that's what I started trying to do. And so I have, like Mike was mentioned earlier, we did everything on cassette tape, right? So you had a side A and a side B. And when I digitized all of my, mixes over the last few years, I didn't realize I had 100 and something mixes that I had, made at that time, because when you count the mixes on both sides, the cassette, that's how many tracks, you wind up having. So from 85 and on, or at least late 85, when I came back to New York, early 86, for the next few years when I was still, DJing, that was the type of style I was doing, where I would, blend a song in over a track, or instrumental, on a track that had vocals on the other side. And so, so that was the house, it was house music, but it was not necessarily only what Chicago was doing, but it was also including what the New York house scene, had. I kind of kicked myself because the garage that you had just mentioned, they didn't close down till about 87 or 88. So I actually had a chance to go there. In fact, I remember when I started my first job in 1986, it was spring of 86, one of the guys I worked with, he used to go there on the weekends. But I think the problem that I had at that time was I was kind of, I don't know how to say that, but I guess I consider myself a little socially backwards. I wasn't that comfortable, hanging out in clubs and all that kind of stuff. I did a lot of stuff. Like I made mixes, but it was like in my room and that's what I was really more comfortable with, as opposed to hanging out in the clubs. So I didn't get a chance to go down there and experience that.
You all are so funny with I was socially, not able to, talk on the mic. I'm like, you're DJs. What are you talking about? I don't get it. Like, you have to.
But when you think about it, Lauren, though, a lot of DJs kind of have that personality in a way, because when you think about like Grandmaster Flash versus Melly Mel, or Eric B versus Rakim, they're all kind of cerebral type. Not all, but a lot of them are. Scott LaRock, versus KRS-One. And I'm just trying to pick out some DJs that maybe you might remember that were from that hip hop scene. A lot of us are probably more introverted, versus being extroverted like a lot of the rappers were. Yeah. So.
Interesting. So, Mike, did you see the music forum becoming big? Did you think it was going to be something you would do for a career, or think that'd be something you'd be doing today, 30, 40 years later?
Well, like I mentioned, I was always pretty mature for my age. And so finished high school, and I think I was only 17 years old in 87. Got my first apartment with my girlfriend, and just adulthood kicked in.
You say 17?
Yeah. And so I got a nice Camaro, got a nice apartment and furniture, and I had 2 nickels to rub and $2 of gas to get to work. So put music on hold for about a decade, and started getting to, I went to a lot of clubs because I love the music. We went to places like, my girlfriend, she was a great dancer, Puerto Rican. So she loved the music, house music, dance music. And so I kept it as a hobby at home. And we went to all the clubs and Red Dogs and stuff like that in the 90s. But, I definitely never stepped away from it and kept in tune with it. But the last, 5 years, I gotten back into it heavily, and currently got a small internet radio station started with a friend of mine, Fernando, and it's called Classic House Radio. And that's been up for 2.5 years now. And we have currently 60,000 followers.
Wow.
Yeah.
So ClassicHouseRadio.com. Where can we find it exactly?
It's called Classic House Radio, and that website, domain was taken or something. So you can find us at ClassicHouseChicago.com.
ClassicHouseChicago.com.
I forward you all the links.
Great.
And you can find me at Mike Palos on Facebook, or rather Chicago DJ Magic Mike. I have a small little side project going also called Flashback Chicago. It's a website where you can find some Magic Mike gear, some old mixtapes, and some just other DJs, and it's all for the fun. And if we make a couple dollars, so be it. But the radio station is doing well. It's internet based only. It's 24 hours of house music, dance music, a lot of 80s and 90s, and we're just starting to get into 2000s on the Sunday show. It was myself and 4 other DJs, so we are the new mature Hot Mix 5. But I just recently brought in another maybe 15 DJs in the last couple of weeks. I've been talking to them, and a lot of young guys, and a lot of dance and EDM and newer house music. I mean, you got Defected Records making records so fast and so great, just like Trax and DJ International did with Benji Espinosa, rest in peace. It's a lot of new music coming out, and so we're taking advantage of that. And we're huge in the Philippines, South Africa, UK. It's just growing. Argentina is huge out there, which is weird. House music, new house music. Yeah.
No, it's not weird at all. It's not weird.
Yeah,
It's perfectly.
To me, it is.
It's exactly what should happen. You know, again, the music form is global, and a lot of people are making a lot of money. Those DJs are making a lot of money on the music, and everyone loves it because it is a heart and soul filled music, and generally very upbeat and music about love. You know, it feels like love. You know, I love hip hop because they're normally teaching something. Lately, of course, they've been teaching about violence and, you know, disrespect to women, but it used to be about history and Black empowerment, etc. House music was always about love, certainly as I see it, based on the fact that it was sort of derived from a Black gay perspective. They were always looking for acceptance and inclusion, as they were speaking about that a lot. And it just really has continued to grow into something that was more spiritual, more love-based. Not everyone likes that, you know, in our community. So they're like, love, what are we talking about? This is terrible. So I feel like, you know, hip hop just was a global force, you know, it just did so much, and so proud of that, how it affects culture again.
Yeah, I mean, we look at the what is it called? The picnic you guys have every year, the
Chosen Few.
Chosen Few. That is like tiny compared to the other events in other countries. House music.
It's tiny compared to Lollapalooza. I mean, not every other country. Chicago, Illinois, Lollapalooza is huge, and half of it started half with you know, a lot of dance music. You know what I mean?
But just a whole night of only house music.
Right.
Lollapalooza is a little bit of everything.
It is.
You look at, you know, these great producers and DJs now, and they lay down you know, the foundation for the new generation, and they just keep it going, and that's what we are. And I'm putting with this radio station together to keep it promoted and keep it going, and maybe I'll be somebody's you know, mentor.
Well, I hope that you can be someone's mentor. I mean, part of what we're doing right now on the Vintage House Show is having a segment called The Spotlight, where we are spotlighting new and mature DJs who've been DJing for 30 years or people who just started 2 years ago. And if they think they want to have a part of our audience, the Vintage House audience has a lot of legends, a lot of promoters, a lot of producers who listen to the show. And so we'll just, you know, we have a talk show where we talk to these legends, and immediately now, so we are doing our part to pass the mic, making sure that people get put on. We allow a 30-minute mix at the end of our show, and we tell them who you are. We talk to you just for a little bit, and then we play your mix, or you play live, and then we allow you all to move on with the day. So the goal is to continue to keep the music moving forward. We always want to sort of pay homage to those groups and organizations and institutions that helped the music form grow. And I consider Easy Lee and DJ Magic Mike two of those people who saw it happen from the beginning, both hip hop and house music, and did their part to, you know, make sure that people got on. Because if you weren't inclusive, if you weren't someone who supported other people, then we wouldn't know Magic Mike. And so that's really important to us to know. All the people should know at WNUR, the DJs have always been inclusive. We have always accepted community DJs. We've also fostered great talent from within the Northwestern community as well. And we want to continue to do that and help others. Again, part of our goal is also to make sure that people know it is an African, you know, sort of descended music form. Lots of other people, Latinas, Latinos, Latinx is certainly a part of this group from the Hot Mix 5 on. But we know a lot of this, you know, the music that it came from, disco, you know, jazz, all these different, you know, sort of music genres contributed to what has formed what we call now house music and techno and EDM, all derived from the Chicago music scene. We like a little New York too with house music. You know, we got to give New York the love. because Frankie was the ambassador, right? And the guy who brought Frankie to Chicago was also from New York, a guy named Robert Williams, who created the Warehouse. He just saw what was going on. He was like, I can do this in Chicago. Come on down, But I think, we just want to give all the people the respect that they deserve for creating the music forum so that people know that. And then I think, people, like T. Chablis, who wants to be in hiding, might come back out at some point because we're honoring him. And the more information we have on, the more information we have on written information we have on you and your contributions, the better. I'm going to throw up one more thing that I'm sure I've sent to you and shown you several times, but this is an article in the Daily Northwestern. I forget what year. You might have to tell me what year, but this is Created All of the Above by Lee Cross. He was an engineering student and journalist and creative. Look at that. You got pictures. We got defining the music form. I mean, that is serious business, Lee. How did this come about? Before we leave,
I was actually trying to remember how I'd imagine somebody from the paper must have approached me because they knew I was doing this thing, and I'm sure that's why I put this article together.
Yeah, you know what? The more I think about it, I have to look again, but I think it was a publication. It was a WNUR publication, not necessarily a Daily Northwestern.
So it wasn't because I was thinking maybe it was a Daily Northwestern, but
yeah, I think they created their own thing for some reason. It was weird. I was like, what is this? We've never seen it before. I don't know if we've ever seen it again, but it was a WNUR thing about the station and the show. What was going on, I think.
And I'm thinking if MD and Larry were part of this, I was already a producer. So being on the board, someone may have approached me to just put this together, and which was the reason why I wrote this.
Well, it's really cool. And I think you do tell a little bit about your story here. The wheels started turning a little faster in our hot mixing department that summer as T. Chablis played mostly house and high energy music, and I played mostly hip hop and imports. And then you go into, by the end of September, we were doing back-to-back Saturday shows, which is great information because, sometimes you look at the playlist, you're like, now where did this come in? We've got, here it is. This is the beginning of it. It was some kind of
I see, the WNUR. Okay, it's the WNUR rag.
I was like, what the heck is that? I'm going to have to turn this around once we get up there. But this was, this was the
formats, how they were lined up.
Right. Sorry, I got to do all that. But yeah, I was like,
and it looks like Street Beat was 12 to 2 in the morning. See how they always had us in the.
No, so it looks like 11.
Okay, 11.
Probably, I got to move all this stuff around. So 11 until maybe 1. So maybe it was just 2 hours, or maybe to 2. I don't understand.
11 to 2. Yeah, it looks like 11 to 2. So it's 3 hours.
So
and then you see Saturday. You had the Friday night hot mixes.
Yes, that is so cool.
Yeah.
So I was like, of course, there's the date here somewhere, but we got the whole list. Like we got a whole bunch of them. And then there's a midday sort of street beat, and I was like, dang, what the heck is that? A midday street beat. And so, we tried to go down. So the more I think about it, I had a Sunday night show. I had the Sunday night 10 to 1 and in 1986. And loved every minute of it. It was so awesome. And then it went to 10 to 2. And I think that got a little tedious. But there was, and I love this too, because you all wouldn't know this, but the reggae show, here's the small little reggae show on Sundays. I came on after the reggae show. By the time I got there, the reggae show had taken over Out of the Blue, which is probably blues, which no one cared about. And whatever this other thing is, was gone. The reggae show was huge. Reggae show, they were doing shows at the China Club. Like they had become so big. And there was a guy
I do remember, and again, it's quarter to the quarter, but I remember one quarter I used to come on after the reggae show.
I came on after the reggae show.
Yeah, I remember one quarter I actually did, because they were always shifting, the programs around. But
that's true, yeah.
But yeah, I do remember
that is so true. They would shift things around a lot. But I came on after the reggae show for years, and then I realized I won't even go into. I had a great story about the host of the reggae show is a guy named Leela DeMose, and he partnered with this Jamaican from the city. And that Jamaican from the city was huge. And so I remember he invited me one day, and I think the Street Beat show was also back in that day doing shows at places in Chicago. And I really need to talk to Rob Olson or somebody a little bit more about that, because they were actually doing shows. And I remember thinking, I can't go to that. I'm not 21. How are these kids doing these shows? Or like, maybe they're older. I don't know. But Leeli DeMose invited me. I was in love with Leeli, by the way. He was the cutest little Ethiopian guy. And he's like, you should come and see our show, Thanksgiving. You know, it's like Thanksgiving Eve or something like that, or the day of Thanksgiving. So I actually did. You know, again, I was 20 years old. I was like, well, I don't know. He says, no problem. Put your name on the list. You'll be fine. I go in, you know how you don't realize you go in, it's 1,000 people in the China Club. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, and I was by myself. I just sat on the stage. I thought to myself, that boy is only 20 years old. Like, how is he on the stage? How is he kicking it with 1,000 people? He was also a theater major, so he knew how to act. You know what I mean? So no one probably believed he was 20. But I know some of those shows, like the jazz show was always huge at WNUR.
Yeah, jazz was always huge. Yeah.
Rock show getting bigger and bigger. Street Beat was just a little bitty thing, you know, as I saw. Did you see it? How did you see it grow? I mean, was it, when you started, was it 1 hour and then it got more hours, or what was going on sort of as you saw it?
Well, you know, the Street Beat show kind of more, you know, we know that it morphed from the soul format. And so the number of hours really didn't change there. What was added was the hot mixing, you know, stuff that we were doing, and which was mostly, you know, myself and Tim, you know, at the time. And then later on, it was MD. But, you know, kind of talking about that, when I got into the producer role, one of the things that was a challenge, and I guess it's real life, but, you know, when I'm 20 years old, you know, it's like you take everything kind of personally. But I'm sitting on the board, you know, a lot of times, and it just seemed like we would get attacked a lot, because it was like, you know, they would question the number of hours we would have. And then somebody else would say, well, I listened to the show the other night and I heard somebody cursing. And it's like, you know, what am I going to do about that? You know, it's like I could remind my staff, you know, whatever, please don't curse. But it just seemed to be, to me, at times that whether it was unfair or whatever, I just kind of felt like it was being targeted or whatever. And it just added to a lot of stress, because, you know, like I mentioned before, I was doing parties on the weekend. I was DJing because I was not just producer, I was DJing, you know, I had my own show. I had work study, you know, I was going to school. So I was burning out, basically, you know, towards the end. When it was time for me to graduate, it was a breath of fresh air, so to speak. I will always remember, you know, having been on the format, and I definitely enjoyed it. But if I had to do it all over again, I would have managed my time a little differently, or not done as many things, try to do as many things, because it definitely made it difficult.
That's true. I think, and thank you so much for reminding me about that. I do want the young people and current producers to understand sort of some of the issues with the Street Beat show and the Soul show, and even before that, how the shows became what they became. I ended up learning quite a bit about sort of the formation of the Soul show, how it went from a show, I forget the name of it now, it's gonna really feel terrible about that now, but they had a lot of issues. I mean, Black students were particularly targeted for things that were happening, not just targeted, but suspended from Northwestern for issues around what was happening at WNUR. And so they had a lot of really, I think there was a show called Blackness that came from a show called Third World Report. And so they were just commenting on Black ideas and things that were happening, then added some music to the show. So then it became 3 hours. One was a talk show, one was radio, one was this, and then it went to something else. Then it went to soul, and then it went to Street Beat. So I saw the progression of that. But I talked to some of the early DJs, and they were telling me about, I mean, not only, they didn't have to tell me, it was recorded in the archives of the Daily Northwestern, that this is what happened at the station that day, and they're being, persecuted. FMO is doing a rally or something around these people. It was like, oh Lord. They are 18, 19 years old. They just want to play radio. They want to play some songs on the radio, and they're getting kicked out of school. You're like, this is, even the adults there had to be like, are we really kicking people out of school for playing a music that had this or that? It's like crazy. But anyway, so I'm happy you mentioned that to me, because it is, people, I think the young people do need to realize that they need to manage their time, recognize sometimes a street beat did always get, and continued for some time, to be sort of, unfairly targeted. It's a new music form they were producing, we were creating and things like that. First of all, the jazz people think the jazz thing is everything. The rock people think the rock people is everything. So they're like, what is this little, music?
Well, you could always tell too by the programming, right? Because when you had the schedule up earlier, you see who had the best time slots.
The biggest time
It was
slots,
the biggest ones. It was rock and jazz, right?
And jazz. So they had everything.
Yeah.
So that's good for people to know. I think the origin of the Street Beat show became really important to me. I was like, Street Beat just come out of nowhere. I didn't think about it, of course, when I arrived, but you were there to see the transition from soul to Street Beat. And that's it's kind of interesting, like how they decided. I'm happy you told me there was a call in to see what the Street Beat. That's kind of interesting. I was like, who came up with that? Because people like me who would think, why are you taking away soul? Soul is cool. You know what I mean? You want to make a street beat. That's more inclusive of everybody. Like, we don't want to be inclusive.
Right.
We just want to be soul, right? But, it worked out well, because that's a perfect name for the music form, in all honesty.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really cool. Gentlemen, any last words, anything you would give, any advice you would give to some of the young people who are sort of at the station now, maybe thinking about careers, thinking about what they might want to do, careers in they're probably their major that's not, radio, TV, film, or what kind of advice would you give young people who are thinking about, being on the station and then getting on the station in their next steps? Mike, I'll go with you.
Yes. Have fun. If you like it, stick with it. Have fun. Otherwise, you're gonna be miserable. So you gotta ask for it. It's like, I gotta be there. I gotta do it. What did I get myself into? You gotta be. It's gotta become from within. So have fun doing it, and you'll see that it'll flourish as it did with me and Lauren and Lee. Yeah.
Lee, what you got?
Well, I would say, you're in between the ages of 18 to 22, 17 to 21. So, and a student there. So take advantage of the opportunity if you have an interest, and try it out. And if it turns out to be a passion of yours, it could be a route that you wind up taking, once you get out of school. But it's also good as a hobby. Like for myself, I was in the DJing and loved it. And it was a good outlet to get my mixtapes, on the air. And through that, I met a lot of people and like Mike, for instance, I've known him. I can't even count the years now, but is it 40 now? Is it going on 40
It's
or 30?
40 now. It's 2021, Lee.
Yeah, so
Wow.
you're right.
Yeah.
So it's close to 40 years, and
Yeah.
there's others I've met, through the station I stay in touch with as well. So, that's a great life, learning, or not necessarily life learning, but it's a great life experiencing thing there.
If I was to tell kids some advice, I would say, if you think you have interest in this music form, or you think you can do big things, I would just do it. You have the rest of your life to work at a corporate job where people pay you every 2 weeks, and you have health insurance and all of that. I think, try it out now. And it is something you might be doing the rest of your life. And if it's not, you can always, certainly if you have a Northwestern degree or not, you can find another gig, or you can always go back to school, go to master's degrees or whatever. This is the time to act on anything crazy, anything unique. If you're creative, do it now. Try it out. There's so many talented young people at the station right now, and people who are passionate about the music like we are passionate at 18, 19 years old. But it is something you can do and enjoy and just have fun. And even if you make little money, you make one little record, people grab it on TrackSource, all of a sudden 1 million people grab it on TrackSource. You could tour that record all through Europe, all through South Africa, all through the United States, even for a year, that's just going to be a great experience. You know what I mean? That's just going to be great. And so I would say,
Lauren, it's interesting. You had me jog a memory there. I'm sure you remember Duke Jenkins, right?
Of course I know Duke, yes.
Yeah. He started a couple of years before I got to the campus. I forgot the exact year, but I think it was in the late 70s. And so when I was there, he was nice to everybody. So I thought that, he was a great friend. So he knew about the stuff I was doing down at the station. He was real supportive of that. And I'll never forget when I was about to graduate, I stopped by, because even after I graduated and I would go to the Chicago area, I would stop by and see him. But before I graduated, I stopped by and told him, I'll be graduating soon and moving on. So he was like, all right, Lee, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. And are you going to, stay in the music business and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I'm just going to graduate and get a job as an engineer and blah, blah, blah. And I'll never forget how disappointed he was in that, because I guess he could see, like what you were just saying, right there, because he had the years. Because basically, like you were saying, if it's something you have a passion about, at least try to pursue it while you're young. And if it doesn't work out, you can always go back and get that corporate job. But I hadn't spent, my parents spent all that money on the education. So I was thinking to myself, yeah, I'm just going to stick with engineering, which it all, worked out in. I mean, it's not like it didn't, but I do think about that sometimes, if I had stayed in the business, because this was before, all the big names you hear about now. About the only one that was probably known at that time, big in the industry, was Russell Simmons, because Puff Daddy hadn't even come around yet, and Tupac and everyone else. And it's not that I'm saying I could have been at that level, but you never know. I could have gone in production. I could have, worked with artists, stuff like that. So
by the way, Duke Jenkins, for folks, was the assistant African American Studies director or liaison, and he was an advisor for many, many, many Black students housed in the Black House on Sheridan Road in Chicago. And he is actually, we've done a lot of things. Again, I wrote a book about Northwestern and some of the key graduates and people, staff, that kind of thing. And we did an interview with a lot of people who were influenced by Duke Jenkins and his family. And there was a gentleman named Emmanuel Jackson. He's now a huge tech guy here in Chicago. And he basically said he ended up running into Duke one day on campus. He was an Evanston student, and Duke Jenkins advised him not to go to college. He says, why would you go to college? There's no need to go. You got a skill right now. You're doing something. There's no need to go to college. Advise this guy not to go to college. Now he's hiring Northwestern grads. You know what I mean? Like, this guy, he's just a huge, smart tech guy. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, I think Duke saw him and was like, all these people walking around going to be working for somebody. Do you want to be one of these people? Because they all trying to get jobs. They all here to learn to get jobs, not to be creative and do their own thing. And, I learned that very early on in my life, but it still worked. I still did a passionate thing, but it still worked. This could have been an even better situation. You know what I mean? Right. Like, I could have straight kicked it on the radio for the rest of my life, I think. But, we'll see. And so, Mike, we're going to see you on the station. When are you? So you are 24 hours.
Yes, 24 hours. ClassicHouseChicago.com.
ClassicHouseChicago.com. And we're going to have you on the spotlight. I don't know exactly when, but I'm going to keep you posted on exactly when you're going to pull up on the spotlight, and we will market it to everyone. And we'll create some marketing for it, so you'll have the graphics to share. And we look forward to seeing you there. And Lee will make sure that so you can listen to him on the spotlight. And I will let you all know when this airs on the different channels. And I just look forward to hopefully seeing and being able to give you all a hug sometime in the next year and a half. So hopefully get to see you soon and meet you in person, Lee, for the first time.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for coming on the Vintage House Show. Vintage House Show is the podcast is vintagehouseshow.com. We are on Vintage House Show on WNUR FM on Facebook Live every Wednesday, 9 p.m. You can also see us on our YouTube page and Twitch. Twitch is the Dance Music Foundation, and several other things. SoundCloud. I can't even think of all the things, but look for the Dance Music Foundation. Look for Vintage House Show, and thank you all again. Have a great evening.
All right. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Good night.
God bless.